That's the sound of a working carburetor. Hell yeah! Alright, today I'm going to be rebuilding a carburetor for a Mantis 2-stroke tiller. This is from the mid-90s to early 2000s period. It's a type SV-4B, type 1E 2-stroke tiller with a Zama carburetor. So I've already partially disassembled it. And I've got my carburetor rebuild kit hiding in here. When I put this thing back together, it'll run good as new. When you're going to remove the carburetor, make sure you've removed the throttle cable here. And this fits into this brass fitting. So what you'll need to do is make sure that you push the throttle in, and this cable will slide out the end of it, and then use your fingers to pop it right off. And you have a couple fuel lines back here. This is the return. This is for the primer. It's a clear one. And I've got this black fuel line down here. I'm replacing this because it's in pretty bad shape. So you can either use a line puller, you can use a screwdriver to push it off, or you can just pull it off with your fingers if you don't really care about the condition of it. And there you go. Carburetor removed. To get these caps off of the high and low jets, what I'm doing is using vice grips and just pulling them off. They don't come off extremely easily, but if you do wiggle them back and forth and pull them, they will come out. And on this particular Zama carburetor, you can see that the screw underneath does actually have a flathead screw hole. It also has a screwdriver, flathead screwdriver needs to be used right there. They also do have the splines around it for your typical small carburetor adjustment tool. Alright, so I'm using a flathead screwdriver to get these needle valves out. And they do come out nice and easy. One thing I did do was to check the number of turns in for each one of these before I removed them, so I could get them roughly to the same setting and then adjust the carb from there once it's all rebuilt. I did talk to a factory representative from Mantis, and they did say to start at 1 1/4 turns. And that's pretty much where these were. They were between 1 1/8 and 1 1/2. So start at 1 1/4 turns out from all the way in, and adjust from there. Something to keep in mind is that the high and low jets are not the same. These needle valves are different from each other, so you're going to want to make sure to put these on a noted piece of paper, or just be able to remember what they look like just by looking at them, low and high. And make sure that you put them back in the same place that they came from, or else the carburetor will not run. Now first I'm going to remove the priming bulb just with a Phillips head screwdriver. This priming bulb is in good shape. I've already cleaned it out, so I will be reusing it. It's not cracked or anything like that. If yours is cracked, I would recommend that you get another one. They're extremely inexpensive. This entire rebuild kit, the rebuild kit itself was 10 bucks, and I got a new fuel line and fuel filter because they were also in pretty bad shape, and got a new gasket to attach the carburetor back to the engine right there. So that gasket's a good one to buy, especially if yours is not in fantastic condition. Which mine was not, and chances are if you're rebuilding your carburetor, it's not in great shape. Or if you just left your carburetor full of gas for a couple winters, maybe it's not too bad and you just need to clean out the carburetor. Some people, when they're disassembling carburetors, like to lay out the parts the way that they came off the carburetor. That helps you keep track of exactly where things went. For example, 4 screws were on top of this primer bulb assembly. 2 of them are different lengths than the other 2, just because of the order that they went on. So it is handy to lay things out on a clean sheet or a piece of cardboard, piece of paper, something so that you can easily identify how things go back on the way they came off. And you just pull this primer assembly off. Comes off nice and clean. And this is the old diaphragm here. This is the metering diaphragm. And it's attached to a gasket. Both of these will be replaced. They are two pieces. If you were going to be taking this apart just to clean and you wanted to make sure that you put everything back together in the same order, you can pull one off the other and lay them out. But since I'm throwing mine away, it's not a big deal. Now, I will flip this over and remove the other cover on the other side. These come off with 2 Phillips head screws. And there we go, pops right off. Another diaphragm, film diaphragm, and some valves. Another gasket, and you have a fairly intricate piece here. Not bad. Throttle adjustment on this side. Okay, that's basically the carburetor disassembled. Gotta remove this gasket, have a gasket scraper in hand. The previous owner had put some kind of tack on here, so this is going to need to be scraped off before the new gasket is put on. So I guess this carburetor had already been apart, but it looks like it was several years ago. Right now it's fairly clean, but it used to be that every single channel in this was just filled with crud. And this whole thing was just filled with crud. The primer bulb was disgusting. It was in pretty bad shape. I was surprised that it ran at all. It didn't run very well, but it was pretty amazing that it actually ran. So I'm going to try and scrape this off, make sure that nothing is covered. And then I'm going to remove this here. So one thing you want to do is make sure that the throttle is nice and clean. There's a lot of little holes all around this. You want to make sure that every single one of them does not have an obstructed opening. There's actually 2 screens on this carburetor. There's one right here and there's one down here. The carburetor rebuild kit only comes with this screen, but you want to make sure that both of them are nice and clean. I'm not sure why it doesn't come with both, but it doesn't. Next step is going to be removing this here so we can access the needle valve. Some people don't remove these all the way and they just slide out the assembly. These aren't extremely strong springs, so it's not like it's going to pop out if you don't remove it all the way. I mean, if you do remove it all the way, excuse me. But if you are planning on reusing the spring, just be careful not to lose it. You just turn it over. Now see, when these are new, these do have a metallic appearance on the end of these needles. They are not rubber like this, which is probably why my engine was flooding out. And so once you have all that apart, that is essentially a disassembled carburetor. Alright, now it's time to nail this with some carb cleaner. You want to get it in every single hole. I've already done many of them since I just cleaned it out before. But when you are using carb cleaner, be extremely careful with this stuff. You are definitely going to want to wear safety glasses. If you get this stuff in your eyes, you're going to regret it. So make sure, if you are using this, if you can be nearby a sink to wash your eyes out if you do get some in there, that'd be very handy. It does burn a lot if you get it in your eyes, so be extremely careful with this stuff. Generally try and, if you're squirting into a hole, try and aim the thing away from your face. You can see that's nice, getting nice and carburetor on it. Carburetor cleaner on there. Get some carburetor cleaner on there. Squirt it in kind of every single hole you can find. It's handy to have a kit with wires. See, these have some texture on the sides of them, some burrs to help you clean out the most disgusting of carburetors. You have a wire of almost every different size, every size available. Every hole that you're going to have on this carburetor, there's a wire that's going to fit it. And you're going to want to select the wire that fits in one of these holes and pass it through the hole several times. You'll be surprised the amount of gunk that comes out on there, even if the hole looks like it's fairly clean. And then once the carb cleaner's had a chance to set in and loosen stuff up, run these things through it, and then spray it with carb cleaner again to spray all the junk out. But you know, you've already taken the thing apart. Spend an extra 2 minutes and clean out every single hole. So to reassemble, I generally start by dropping the needle back into the hole, and I'll sit my spring right back where it goes, and then I'll assemble my lever and the rod that it pivots on. And there's a little divot on this lever that's supposed to sit right on the spring. And if you haven't removed your screw all the way, this can be a bit challenging to put back in. Basically, just slide the lever over the needle head, and then push the pivoting rod right back under the screw, and then you can just screw back down. If you have an extra set of hands available, sometimes taking that screw out helps. You want to make sure not to tighten that screw too much, and afterward just check it to see that it moves nice and free and it bounces back no problem. You don't want this to be too loose, so you know, just double check it, make sure it's good, and make sure it pivots nice and easy. Okay, good to go. Now flip it on over, pop the new screen in, and you might want to lightly press it with a screwdriver to make sure that it's nice and seated. Don't want to deform it, just want to make sure that it's nice and seated in there. And hopefully when you were disassembling everything, you remove the screen that was here next to the throttle and clean that as well. Now to put the jets back in, the needle valves. And remember, we're going to be putting these all the way in till they bottom out, and then back them off 1 1/4 turns. So get them started by hand to make sure you're not cross-threading, and then take out your screwdriver and put them all the way in. I will say the one thing that's nicer about having a spline tool is that while the engine is running, it's a lot easier to adjust because the spline tool doesn't want to slide out of the slot. You know, it's around the entire head of the screw. So that's nice about that. But the other issue is that they are, you know, not readily available and upwards of $20. So if you have a steady hand, either one is okay. So that's bottomed out, and that's bottomed out. Now that's a half turn, full turn, quarter turn. 1 1/4 out for that one. Now that's a half turn, full turn, quarter turn. Okay. So let's see if we can get the thing idling once you get this back together with this, and then adjust either way. Basically, you'll want to get the high, this one here, and keep opening it up to get it to run until it runs smoothly at high throttle. So you take this screw, you unscrew it more while you're pulling down full throttle until it runs smoothly. And that's how you find where it's supposed to be. But 1 1/4 turns is a good place to start. Alright, now we'll get the gaskets back on here. I generally like to start on the bottom. Okay, so you take the bottom, and the first part you want to put on here is the gasket. And then you want to take the new diaphragm and reed valves. You place this on that side. And it's got these 2 little pegs here, so you really can't put this on incorrectly, which is nice. Yeah, you're forced to line it up right. And that's handy when companies will do something like that. What you will probably have to do is pull the throttle out of the way, because it'll try and fight you as you're putting this thing on. And basically just slide it, get it on the dowels, and there you go. Yeah, you can see how this adjuster here forces your throttle to stop and idle at a certain spot, just like that. So if you need to adjust your idle, that's where you do it, is with this screw. And then, you know, for good measure, put these screws on while you've got this together, holding it in one hand. Definitely a two-handed operation, unless you're, you know, more skilled than I am. And just make sure they're tight. You don't want to over tighten it. Definitely don't want to strip anything out. So just make sure they're tight. All right, flip it on over to the other side here. Now here is sort of the opposite. Here you're putting the diaphragm on the cap first. This one's a little tougher to get situated, and the gasket goes behind it. Unfortunately, nothing on this side to hold everything together. So, and remember which way you oriented it. How did this go on? That's kind of the question you got to ask yourself. But hopefully you laid everything out the way that they came off, so you know. It's also good to take pictures as you go, so you can always look back at a picture and make sure that you're putting it back on and that it looks the way it looked before you took it off. Now remember, this piece is plastic on this particular carburetor, so you definitely don't want to over tighten this. The last thing you want to do is be most of the way through your rebuild and then you break something. Primer bulb back on. Retainer on there. And then screw it back together. Alright, carburetor is back together. I'm not going to be putting the caps back on mine because they're a pain in the neck to adjust with them on there. So the last piece missing here is to put this gasket on between the motor and this unit here. So if your fuel line is cracked or cracks when you pull it, if yours is in the same condition that mine is in, I would highly recommend that you replace it. It's pretty easy to pull the grommet out of the gas tank. Make sure the grommet's in good shape when you're pulling it out as well. If the gas tank doesn't hold pressure, you're going to have a problem. See, damn, my line just broke right off in there when I was yanking this thing out. So I'm going to have to fish that out of there. But all you really have to do is just pull this line out of this grommet and replace it with a new line. I've got a line directly from Mantis. They stocked it there, and they also had a new fuel filter that I put on there because mine was in very bad shape as well. I think this was, like $2. I mean, it's not really that expensive. These machines are pretty nice and easy to maintain and service, and extremely inexpensive to do so, which allows you to keep them running for a very long time. Okay, new fuel line is in here, all ready to go. This check valve, I tested it when I was priming fuel before I disassembled the carburetor. If you pump your fuel bulb, the primer bulb, and it fills with fuel and holds the fuel, then this valve is most likely working and is not the problem. So that's just something else to keep in mind. If it's not holding fuel, it could be because this grommet is bad, or this valve up here is bad, this check valve. But if the grommet looks good, like this one's in pretty good shape, stretches nicely, no holes, no tears, no cracks, then you're good to go. This fuel line, because this thing was stored with fuel in it for so long, this fuel line was just destroyed. Especially now that the fuel has ethanol in it, it just eats these things up and crystallizes. The fuel degrades and crystallizes inside of it, just clogs it up and destroys your carburetor. So while you're rebuilding your carburetor, if you're rebuilding it because the engine sat for a little while with fuel in it, you might as well save yourself the time, get some extra fuel line, new fuel filter because it's probably clogged, and put it all back together good as new. Alright, once you have your assembly ready to go, ready to get it back on the 2-cycle engine, you can see I've got my gasket on there. This is the intake here with the choke lever right on there. You just want to take this whole assembly and just kind of slide it right here into the holes on the insulating block. And then, just hand tighten the screws a bit to get it set, get it going, and then tighten it the rest of the way down with a screwdriver. And then you're going to make sure you re-hook up both lines. You want to hook the priming line, the return line back up to the priming bulb, and you're going to want to hook up the black line back to the fuel feed on the bottom. And then start her up and see how she runs. Now that's the sound of a working carburetor. Not bad, 15 bucks.